record. Okay, so my apologies for those who will listen to this later. I forgot to stream and record, so now I caught it. I was just giving a recap of what we've heard so far, and so without further ado, I will get into it. So, Om Jnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namashirishtam Manumapi Sachiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Murupuring Matharing Goshtavarting Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurung Tang Natusmi Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga Shikshartameka Purusha Purana Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sri Radha Hari Kripam Budhiryastamahang Prapadye He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Okay, well, thanks everybody for showing up to the fifth and final installment of our short series on Sri Radha, the glories of Radha. So today we come finally to the Leela section, which I have been mentioning we were going to get to, and so today I'm drawing this from the Govinda Lilamrita of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So this is a book that is describing the Aprakat Leela, the unmanifest Leela. So it's just it goes from Krishna's. It doesn't include the birth Leelas, and it doesn't have Krishna leaving Vrindavan to go to Mathura or any of that. So it's just Krishna gets up in the morning and goes through his day. And so this is, as Guru Maharaj has described it, a day in the life in eternity of the Absolute. And of course, there are different descriptions of this day in the life or of the Ashtakaliya Leela, the eightfold Leela. There's this one. There's also by Vishwanath Chakravarti, and there are others. And this is probably one of the better known ones, and it's a personal favorite of mine because Kaviraj Goswami's the way he tells the story is very, very poetic, and sometimes his Sanskrit is just amazing. So I wanted to discuss a particular pastime at the midday, and specifically at Radha Kund. And so, well, one may immediately think, wow, that's really high stuff, very intimate, and it is. But the reason I chose that particular Leela is because it includes the Priyanarma Sakas, and so considering the nature of the Sangha we have, I like to show how they figure in even at these in these very, very intimate Leelas during the midday at Radha Kund. So, but before we get to Radha Kund, so Krishna has taken the cows out, as he does every morning after breakfast, and he's wandering through the forest and whatnot, and he's come to he's near Govardhan with the cowherd boys and the cows, and he as he does every day. He wants to meet with Radha. And so he says, Tata sakin aha hari saharya yuyam kshanam charaya tagrahod aham sakibhyam saha madhaviyan vanashriyam drashtum iha brahmami. He said, oh friends, go ahead herding the cows with Balaram for a while. I will wander around in the forest a little with Subal and Madhumangal to enjoy the beauty of the spring forest. So he tells a little white lie there to his friends, because while he may be going to look at the beauty of the forest, that's incidental. What he's really going to do is meet with Radha and her friends. But in the process of doing that, so there's a whole, he's there with his friends, and then some other Vrinda and Tulasi, aka Tulasi Manjari, who is escaped me here, Raghunath Das Goswami and Gaur Leela. So Vrinda and Tulasi, and I believe Dhanishta, show up, and they're having this discussion. Yes, Vrinda, Dhanishta, Subal, Madhumangal, they're having this discussion how Radha and Madhava can meet, because it's not that easy. And so some days Radha can't get out of the house because her overbearing mother-in-law, Jatila, keeps her there because she's always suspicious about Krishna. And she, as a dutiful mother-in-law, even though she is overbearing, she's dutiful in the sense that she's trying to protect the good name of her daughter-in-law, Radha. And so she doesn't want Radha to be sullied or contaminated by association with that known womanizer, Krishna. But today, she does get out. And so a bunch of things happen that I won't go into here, but so while they're having this discussion, Chandravali's girlfriend Shaibya shows up, thinking to lure Krishna into Chandravali's kunj. When she hung Chandravali's gunja string around Krishna's neck, she became painfully disturbed to see Vrinda and Tulasi with him. Seeing Krishna speaking with Radha's dear friends, Shaibya became sad, thinking that Radha had come, so she falsely told Tulasi, today, Chandravali will hold a festival for Durga's worship, and she has sent me here to invite Radha. I looked for her everywhere, in the forest and in her home, but I did not find her anywhere. Fortunately, I met you now, Tulasi. Tell me, where is your friend? So, Tulasi could understand Shaibya's deceitfulness and thought, one should deceive a deceiver. So she slyly told Shaibya, Radha was invited by Shyam Saki today to attend a festival for the worship of Ambika Devi. Having come there, she was entrusted with all the responsibilities for the festival's execution, along with all her girlfriends. Lalita sent me here to get Vrinda to bring fruits, flowers, and garlands. I will take her there just now. So, even though Chandravali, we know from the Shastra, is the two primary gopis in all of Braj are Radha and Chandravali. When Chandravali and her camp try to bring Krishna there, sometimes he won't go. Sometimes he does go. But on this particular day, he was only interested in meeting with Radha, and so they cheat Shaibya. So that's another example of Radha's love conquering Krishna, controlling Krishna, because he doesn't want to go with anybody else. He just wants her, because she's the only one who can truly satisfy him. So after that, they finally make it to Radha Kund, and I thought it would be appropriate to discuss Radha Kund a bit, or the description of it, because it's if we think of the Leela as a dramatic scene in a drama, in a play, let's say, then there's a setting. And the setting for this, the Leela that we're going to go over today briefly, is Radha Kund, of course. And so, as we know from the Brahma Samhita, Braj is described as a lotus, right, with these petals, different compartments of the spiritual world reside in each of the petals, and they're associated with different people and whatnot. And so, just as the entirety of Braj is considered to be a lotus, so also Radha Kund is a lotus with 8 petals. And each of these 8 petals, the petals would be like a metaphoric way of describing the different groves, the kunjas that surround Radha Kund. So the pond itself is like the whirl, the center of the lotus, and then these kunjas that each of the ashtasakis are associated with go surround the pond. And so Lalita's is in the north, and then it goes clockwise. So Lalita, Vishaka, Chitra, Induleka, Champakalata in the south, Ranga Devi, Tungavidya, and Sudevi, like that. And each of these groves is associated, Kaviraj Goswami, I mean, he gives a whole chapter describing Radha Kund alone, just the trees and how it's all laid out and the different swings, and it's very elaborate description. It's very clearly an amazing place for Radha Madhava to play out their pastimes. And it's the midday pastimes take up a number of chapters. It's actually the bulk of the book. And so he takes the most, clearly the midday pastimes for Shringar Rasa, for Mridaya Rasa, obviously are the most important. And so he spends a lot of time describing them. And so each of the groves are also associated with a color. And I thought this is a fun little detail, just kind of throw in there. Lalita and Vishaka's aren't, I couldn't really find the description, but the others are like Chitra's grove is multicolored because her name Chitra means variegated or wonderful. And then Induleka's is white and crystal. So depending on the mood of the divine couple, they'll go to these different groves and they'll experience it's just a way of having a different experience. You can imagine if you went into a grove that was like all the flowers were white and there was crystals and everything was just white, it would be really interesting. And then you go to a different grove, Champakalata's grove, for example, and the champak flower is golden. So like her name, her grove is golden. Or Ranga Devi's grove is predominantly black, like Krishna. Or Tungavidya's is red, and Sudevi, her grove is predominantly green. And so today's pastime takes place in the green grove of Sudevi. So Radha Kund, of course, is, you hear about it, Rupa Goswami mentions Radha Kund in Upadeshamrita and how it is not different from Radha. And Kaviraj Goswami says, through its great qualities, Radha's lake is as dear to Sri Hari as Sri Radha herself. So, and the reason this is because it reminds Krishna of Radha in so many different ways. They're very dear to him. So, oh no. Oh, sorry, I'm just, looks like we got a bit of a technical issue. Kali Yuga Pavan, is it working for you now? Do I still have to set you up again?
No, I don't have translation. Still, I don't have translation.
Okay. See if I can figure that out here. Yes, no problem. Okay. Okay, good. All right, so the two lotuses kind of made me think of this, because this is how my weird mind works. There's this thing in mathematics called fractals, which I'm sure you've heard of. So basically, it means that, or a hologram where one small part is reflective of the whole. So I kind of thought of how, in the same way that the entirety of Braj is a lotus, Radhakund is a smaller lotus within Braj, and so there's this as above, so below kind of quality, which you will find, and we'll go into a little bit, or we'll go into a bit more later. Slightly different, but similar. So Radhakund is dear to Krishna because it reminds him of Radha. And of course, he spends his days there, his middays there, from the late morning through all the way until the afternoon. So probably 5 or 6 hours every day. So if that wasn't evidence enough that Radha is the person that he wants to spend time with, as opposed to Chandravali, then, I think you'd have a hard time finding better evidence than that. Now, interestingly, I thought we would also go over a little bit about Shamakund. So Shamakund, of course, is right next door to Radhakund, and they're joined by a short canal, canal. It's basically just a little channel of water. And so in Shamakund, there are also, like at Radhakund, there are different groves that are presided over by Subal and Madhumangal, Ujjval, Arjun, Gandharva, Vidagdha, Bringa, Kokil, Daksha, and Sananda. So these groves are surrounding Shamakund. And Kaviraj Goswami mentions 3 of them: Subal, Madhumangal, and Ujjvala are associated, or they're those gopas are surrendered to particular sakis, and in there assisting the romantic pastimes of Krishna. Subal is his group leader is Radha, and Madhumangal's is Lalita, and Ujjvala's group leader is Vishaka. So those are the 3 that are mentioned in the text of the Govinda Lilamrita. So I thought that was interesting, just how that kind of how it plays out, and that the Priyanarmasakas they're very close by. Either they're close by, or today we'll hear they're directly involved in the pastimes of Radha Madhava. So Radha and Madhava have finally, through so much effort, have succeeded in meeting at Radhakund. And they go through a number of pastimes before we get to the one that we're going to hear. So at the beginning of each chapter, the way the Govinda Lilamrita works, Kaviraj Goswami gives a single verse that gives an overview of that period of the day. So In the morning, he says, Krishna does this, 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 and this, and this. And then the next period, he explains, and then he goes on to, in the entire chapter, for the rest of the chapter, he explains what those pastimes are. So let's see if I can find it here. So in his summary of the midday pastimes, he says, I remember Radha and Krishna at midday, full of desire, being served by their attendants, enchanted by various ornament-like physical transformations of ecstasy. Those would be sattvika bhavs and others, arising out of meeting each other, being anxious out of shyness and eagerness. Being pleased with the joking words of Lalita and other girlfriends, they perform a sacrifice for Cupid. Swing, in other words, they get on a swing, tour the forests, play in the waters of Radha Kund, quarrel over Krishna's stolen flute, a fun one, make love, drink honey wine, worship the sun god, and play other sports. So the one we're going to hear today is one of those other sports that he doesn't mention, Kaviraj Goswami doesn't mention here, and that is dice. So now I'm not super familiar with Indian style dice, but it sounds from the description that it's kind of a sort of like a chessboard, and then but somehow there's dice rolled so that one can move one's pieces. So dice and then Surya Puja. So that's what we're going to hear. So in this chapter, Surya Puja and a game of dice. So Radha and Madhava, and before they get to playing dice, they have engaged parrots, a Shuka and a Shadi. Shuka is the male parrot and the Shadi is the female. And they've engaged the parrots in glorifying each other. So they've heard that, and now after rewarding the Shuka and Shadika, they wanted to play dice. So they went to the green kunj of Sudevi Saki, named Sudevi Sukhada, giving joy to Sudevi. Hari entered the wonderful cottage in the kunj and sat down on a seat with his friends, while Radhika and her girlfriends sat down on the other side, across from him. Madhu Mangal and Lalita became Krishna's and Radhika's respective advisors. Sudevi and Subal sat on their sides to throw the dice. Nandimukhi and Vrinda were the referees, and Kundalata was the leader of the audience. Shyam took golden, gaur dice, and Radhika took bluish dice to play with. So this is an example of, it's not the same, like I was saying before, of the as above, so below idea, but it's an example of just how I think probably one of the best visual descriptions I can think of and that I've liked over the years is the Taoist symbol of the yin and the yang. And prior to becoming a Gaudiya, I dabbled a bit in Taoism and read some of the stuff, and I liked that imagery. It always made sense to me, and I found it to be very elegant. And then, of course, when I became a Gaudiya, I found that there was there was an application for that. Even though Gaudiya Vaishnavism is radically different from Taoism, the symbolism could easily be applied to Radha and Krishna. You've got the two opposites, and the two, you cannot have just one. There won't be a complete whole if there's just one or the other. So the two together make up the whole. And just like, and you find like there's in the yin and yang symbol, there's the black with the white dot and the white with the black dot. And so I've always considered that something along the lines of like Krishna is dark, but he's wearing golden cloth, and Radha is golden and she's wearing dark cloth. And so this interplay of these opposites is throughout the Leela. And so here again, this is kind of an example of that, where Krishna is dark, but he takes golden dice, and Radha takes bluish dice. And, That's kind of a philosophical way of thinking about it, but of course, the the emotion behind it is they're so in love with the other that they want something to remind themselves of the other in every situation, at every moment. uh, so that's an example of just how much affection they have for each other. So they've got their dice, and for the first throw, Krishna's pet deer Suranga and Radhika's pet doe Rangini were wagered. Krishna won, so Madhu Mangal joyfully bound up the doe and took her along. So I guess they have a place where whatever has been won is kept during the game. For the second throw, Krishna's flute, Murali, and Radhika's Veena, Pavika, were wagered. Radhika won, so Lalita snatched the flute away, although Krishna tried to hide it. Because he's a sore loser. Also shows how dear the flute is to Krishna, which we've heard in other, not in this series, but those of us who are familiar with this topic have heard that Krishna, that the deer is the flute is the most dear companion in Braj. We hear that from Brahma Samhita. For the third throw, Radha and Krishna's necklaces were wagered. Thinking that Radhika had cheated, Madhu Mangal said, Shari Tong Maraya. So he meant to say, knock that piece of chess off the board, the chess piece called Shari. And thinking Madhu Mangal meant kill that Sharika, the Sharika, the she parrot named Kalokti, chirped pitifully and fearfully, flew up into the nearest tree branch. Seeing this, the assembled Sakis laughed. Seeing that everyone was laughing and making noise, deceitful Hari said, see, I've killed that Sharika, even though he had not scored enough. So obviously, if we were more familiar with the game that they're playing, it would make more sense. So apparently when you score enough, you can knock a piece off the board, and Krishna is trying to claim that he's done that. And Madhu Mangal thought that he had done that and said, kill that piece, basically, kill that Sharika. And then the parrot thought that Madhu Mangal was talking about her, and so she flies away. So this is an example of just this hasya ras kind of pervading the game, and as we see, Madhu Mangal is right there. Then Krishna threw a sufficient score to block the course of Hari's, then Radhika threw a sufficient score to block the course of Hari's pieces, a kind of checkmate with her saris. She laughed and said, I have won. Then they both fought hand to hand over the necklaces, and Madhu Mangal, Kundalata, and all the Sakis also quarreled with each other. So this giant fight breaks out over who actually won. So Krishna's he's a bit of a cheater, so they like to cheat each other. When they consulted the referees, Nandi Mukhi and Vrinda, they both said, our minds were elsewhere. We didn't hear what was said. So we decide that your positions are tied. Whoever has won or lost, just throw again and keep your necklaces on your necks. So apparently both of the referees did not want to claim either Radha or Krishna as a winner, and so they just, do it over. Okay. Radha and Krishna then threw a fourth dice, now putting their own friends at stake, and Radhika won. Madhu Mangal became afraid, thinking, now they'll take me away. He slyly moved the dice around over the board, trying to conceal Govinda's low score. And Radha and Krishna began to quarrel. I have won, throwing each other's pieces over the board. Seeing this, the Sakis came and bound Madhu Mangal up. Thus, a great quarrel arose between them. So they can't even play a game of dice without fighting. But that, of course, is part of the ras. So the next verse gets into a bit of technical scoring and whatnot of the game. And then well, anyway, I'll read it. Why not? Then Krishna told Radhika, by thus moving our pieces, a dispute will ensue. Let's forget the last throw and start again, showing each other the signs of our dice. Let's throw more, deciding who wins or loses by the signs of our dice. There are 10 numbers in this game, and 4 of them are equal. Of the 6 unequal numbers, one is called Vamancha, 10. This one is yours also. Then there are 5 numbers for you and 5 for me. We can both take as many parts of each other's limbs as we score when we win. So this is the point of the verse here, is that the loser must embrace the victor. That must be the wager this time. So you can see the stakes are going up. First, they're wagering things that are, their pet and their instruments, and then their necklace, and then the friends. But now it's like, okay, now it's getting interesting. Now they're wagering kisses and whatnot, and embraces. So then Radhika threw and scored 10, which is perfect score. Seeing this, the Sakis blissfully laughed. Pretending to be morose, Krishna said, now you can take 10 of my limbs, namely, my arms on your arms, my chest on your breasts, my hands in your hands, my lips on your lips, my cheek on your cheek, and my mouth on your mouth. Radha told Kundalata, oh, referee Kundalate, I won. Now you can take the reward with your limbs. I placed my limbs in yours. So she doesn't want to take it directly. She's trying to deflect it and have Kundalata take the reward. Hari threw and scored 4 plus 5. So that's 9. That's a good score. He was very happy with this. So Kundalata said, oh, Krishna, take 9 of Radha's limbs, her eyes, cheeks, forehead, lips, face, and breasts. She has become very proud by somehow winning even a little. Forcibly kiss her in front of her friends. So Kundalata said, I have placed all these limbs in Lalita's left cheek, so place your lips there. Hearing this, Krishna eagerly came up to Lalita to kiss her. Then Radhika exclaimed, Dash Vamancha, and threw the dice. So Krishna took this as an indication and saying, as you order. So then throughout this type of Leela, what we're hearing is that there's so many, in French they say double entendre, which basically means that there's a everything said has a surface meaning, and it has a hidden meaning, a concealed meaning. And of course, the concealed meanings are well, let's just say in polite company, you generally don't kiss and tell. Like an example, for example, would be an example I was thinking of earlier, which isn't in this pastime, but so let's say Radha and Krishna, after they've been alone in the Kunj together, and then Krishna will, and Radha, when they go out before the Sakis again, Krishna will start to tell the other Sakis what he and Radha were just doing. And this embarrasses Radha no end. So generally speaking, in polite company, you don't kiss and tell. You don't tell your friends what you do with your in your intimate pastimes with your significant other. It's generally not considered considered poor taste. Now Krishna does it, of course, because it increases he likes to see that embarrassment and all the arguments that will ensue from that. But the general rule in love, and especially in Indian aesthetics, is that we hear this from the Bhagavatam, that parokshavad, indirect speech, is considered more relishable than direct speech. And so you'll have all these types of statements where they say one thing but they actually mean something else. And So Radha says Dashavamancha, and then the verse Kaviraj Goswami explains what's actually being said there. So Dasha can mean 10, but it can also mean bite. So Radha said, she threw the dice, Dashavamancha. And so there's the external meaning is referring to the dice and the score and the game of dice that's going on, but then the internal meaning is Krishna can take that. So he went to kiss the Lita because the Dashavamancha can refer to that. Because her left cheek, Vama, so Dashavamancha. So Sanskrit is very flexible like that, one word can have many meanings, and so you can get so many different meanings out of a single statement or sentence. So when Krishna went to kiss Lalita, she got angry and became averse to the game, rebuking Krishna and Kundalita. Krishna told Radha, "You always win. Now take my limbs." So Krishna began to kiss all of Radha's limbs, causing her to rebuke him with crooked, restless eyes and unclear words, giving him great joy with her crying mixed with laughter and her knitted eyebrows as she curbed him with both hands. So he goes to kiss her, she's stopping him and she's flustered and can't speak clearly and whatnot. And this is another aspect of the romantic lila, the rasa that comes from this, is that the heroine, if the heroine makes herself too available and too easily attainable, then there's less rasa, it reduces the rasa. And so even when they're together at Radha Kund and Krishna's going to, she doesn't just say, "Okay, come and kiss me." She's like, no. She's always oppositional. And so this is her Vamya nature, that domineering nature, and it's considered in love sports, in Indian aesthetics, it's considered bad form if the heroine makes herself too easily conquerable, so to speak, or too easy to win over. And so she remains oppositional, and this, of course, just increases Krishna's thirst. So while they played dice like this, Sharika, a female parrot named Sukshmati, suddenly came and said, "Jatila is coming from Braj." Hearing this, Radhika and Achyuta became scared and quickly took everyone along to a kunj named Kunjainara, a few miles northwest of Radha Kund. Kundalata kept Krishna there and went with Radha to the sun temple. When they came there, Jatila asked Radha, "Why are you so late?" Kundalata said, "I could not find any Brahmin to do the puja, although I looked everywhere. The young gopis had already taken away all the young Brahmin boys yesterday. Only one young Brahmin from Mathura, a disciple of Sri Gargamuni, could come. He is expert in worshipping the sun god, and his name is Vishvasharma. He met Krishna in Kamyavan, where he was herding his cows. Then he came to bathe in Arishtakund, Shyamakund. There we asked him to come with us to do Surya Puja, but Madhu Mangal, who knows your faults, became angry at your bitter words and forbade this boy to go see you." Jatila said, "Where's this boy now?" Kundalata said, "He is looking at the beauty of the forest." Jatila said, "Bring him here carefully." Kundalata said, "Knowing your character, he does not want to come." Jatila said, "Go there with Dhanishta and tell this boy that if he doesn't want to come, I will give him nice sweets and a big reward, and he can take Madhu Mangal along with him too." Being thus repeatedly petitioned by Jatila, Kundalata and Dhanishta quickly went to get Krishna, who came along with them, and Madhu Mangal, dressed as a Brahmin, as the Vedas personified. So this is a great one. So the very person that Jatila is constantly on guard against, I should say, and is trying to keep Radha away from, is the very person who is going to show up and do the Surya Puja. And she won't recognize him because he comes dressed as a Brahmin. He's in disguise. And somehow or another, she doesn't recognize who he is. And so much hilarity will ensue. So Jatila honored Krishna when he came, and Krishna happily blessed her, saying, "May your son have many cows, and may your daughter-in-law be embraced by all auspiciousness." And the implication there is embraced by all auspiciousness. That auspiciousness is personified by himself. So may your daughter-in-law be embraced by me, he's saying. When he began the worship, Krishna said, "What is the name of your daughter-in-law?" Jatila said, "Radha," upon which Krishna became astonished and said, "Is she that qualified girl whose chastity is known even in Mathura? You are blessed to have such a daughter-in-law." Then he said to Radhika, I never do puja to the shining, incorporeal God, the sun, or Cupid, without being accepted as priest, so you must accept me. You see, I never touch women, so touch this kusha grass and repeat after me." An inner meaning. This sacrifice cannot be accomplished with clothes on, so you must take off all your clothes. I am the Lord of all women. You should play with me with your kusha sharp nails. So this is a great example of saying one thing to deceive Jatila on the surface, when in fact there's this inner meaning that's only for them. So he tells her to say, "I accept Vishvasharma, whose dynasty bestows fortune on the world, and who is more pure and learned, and who is most pure and learned, as my priest." The second meaning, "I accept Krishna, whose name purifies the world, who is most learned in the art of eros, and who gives joy to the world, as mine." I offer my obeisances. This is Krishna is still speaking. He's saying, telling Radha what to say. "I offer my obeisances to the sun god. Mitra means friend, who is the friend of the lotuses, who appeared before me, destroying the darkness with his splendor, and who is brightly red in the morning and evening." The second meaning, I offer myself to Krishna, who destroys the affliction of lust, who is the friend of the lotus-like gopis, and who is very attractive. With this mantra, you offer argya, hand water, and padya, foot water, to the golden-dressed sun, who will fulfill your desires. And the pun there is, now offer your body to the golden-dressed Krishna, who will fulfill your desires. Then Marumangal recited, "Swasti Vrachang Shashvat," be ever blessed, and told Radha, "Radhe, to complete the worship of the sun and to increase your wealth of cows, you must now offer some cows to him, to the sun god." But the internal meaning is, "Radhe, now you must offer your senses to the cowherd king, Krishna, to fulfill his erotic sacrifice." With devotion, Jatila offered the priest, Krishna, the sweets and Radha's golden finger ring, but Madhava smiled and said, "We don't accept prasad from demigods. We are exclusive Vaishnavas, and I am a pure celibate Brahmin, so I don't accept gifts from other castes. I'm a disciple of Garga Muni, an astrologer, palm reader, and a clairvoyant. My greatest reward is the love of the people of Vraj, like you." Jatila whispered something in Kundalata's ear, and Kundalata told Hari, "The revered Jatila wants you to read the hand of her daughter-in-law to see what is her future." Hari told her, "We do not touch women, but because I love you, I will still look at Radha from a distance. Spread the hands of this chaste girl out before me." Kundalata did this, and when he saw Radha's hands, he began to shed tears, horripilate, and shiver of ecstasy. So Satvika bhavs are manifest in him. Krishna concealed his ecstasy with his astonishment and said, "Aha, how amazing. I can see from the auspicious signs on her hand that this girl is the goddess of fortune herself. If she casts her merciful glance we have our desires for wealth fulfilled, and wherever she lives, all is auspicious and opulent. And so that's the surface meaning, but the internal meaning is whenever she blesses me with her body, I am blessed. So this is a really interesting example of how in the Leela, they will speak the philosophical truth about things. Like, for example, Radha is indeed the goddess of fortune herself, right? Radha is the source of all the Lakshmis. And so Krishna's in the context of playing this whole subterfuge, this whole ruse to deceive Jatila. He speaks the truth about Radha's nature as being the source of the original, the original Lakshmi. And yet that only serves to increase the rasa that is happening, that is being played out here. So then Krishna asked Jatila, what is the name of your son? When Jatila told him this, he saw his horoscope, he was amazed and said, oh, old one, this boy has many difficulties in life, but they are nullified by the influence of this chaste girl. Hearing this, Jatila was very happy and placed Radhika's 2 valuable jeweled rings before Krishna as a reward. Then Subal came and said, oh, Vishvashanaman, Hari waits for you to come with Madhamangal and eat fruits and milk from him, because fruits and milk is all the Brahmins except from lower castes. Krishna said, I don't accept food cooked by non-Brahmins. Gargi, a Brahmin girl, the daughter of Gargamuni, has invited me today and I'm going there quickly. Madhamangal, you can take the food. Madhamangal said, oh, old woman, give me the reward for my blessings. And Jatila gave him the golden ring from her own finger. Madhamangal was very happy to get this and repeatedly slapped his armpits. That's an anubhav of Sakiras. Then, urged by Jatila, he told Krishna, accept her reward, otherwise her sacrifice is not complete. Please take the reward. If you don't need it, then give it to another Brahmana. It will be for the benefit of this avowed lady. Although Krishna repeatedly refused, Madhamangal said, I will accept the result of your shortcoming, laughed and bound the 2 rings in his cloth. So Madhamangal picks up Radha's rings, and of course later on, he gives them back to one of Radha's Sakis, who gives them back to her. Jatila told Krishna, oh Brahman, whenever I am so fortunate that you come to Vraj, then please perform the Surya Puja for my daughter-in-law, and I will give you a big fee. Saying this, Jatila bowed down to the sun god and the 2 Brahmanas. Feeling satisfied, she returned home with Radhika and her friends. While Radha went home with Jatila, she repeatedly turned her neck, looking behind her on the pretext of speaking with Lalita and the others, just to look back at Murari. Although Radha drank the nectar of Hari's lotus-like face like a bumblebee with the waves of her glances, she could still not be satiated. This made her very unhappy. So the Leela goes from Sambhog back into Vipralamba, into separation again. So that it's a fun example of some of the things that Krishna, Radha, and their friends do during the midday. As you can see, if you become absorbed in this world, there's a lot there. This poem is, I think, 2,100 verses or something like that, and even that is still the barest of outlines of what actually goes on in a day of Krishna's life. And so you can see it's very absorbing. Like, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is all day he's absorbed in this Ashtakali Lila Radha Madhava. So this is a nice point that he's a sannyasi, and yet this is what he's meditating on. So it shows that the nature of Radha and Krishna's intimate leelas are anything but mundane, and they are supremely pure and purifying. So to hear about them, of course, is a very powerful means of actually entering into them at some point, when not just when we are pure enough, but when also, moreover, I should say, purity is one thing, but with actual priti or affection, love, real powerful love that is powerful enough to attract Krishna to us, and thus have him bring us into the Leela, that will come about by hearing these types of Leelas and meditating on them. Now, of course, for most of us, where we're at in our daily lives, we're not able to meditate on the Ashtakali Leela in any detailed way. It's nice to hear these types of things, but it's generally speaking, most of us aren't qualified to live there, let's say. But one thing that you'll find is that our conception of spiritual life goes from the general to the more specific. So in the beginning, we hear about Krishna and Radha and the holy name and all these kind of general tattvas and truths and whatnot. And with Raga Nuga Bhakti, it becomes more and more and more specific. So we first hear about Krishna. He's the supreme. Okay, the supreme has Shakti, Radha. They have friends, parents, brother, cowherd friends, all this, the land of Braj. We hear about all these types of things, and then, these different types of relationships. And then, so that's a general kind of survey understanding of Krishna and the Padavyom, or his specific region of the Padavyom, I should say. And then through hearing and through association, we become attracted to one of those particular flavors of love. And so obviously in our Parivar, it's predominantly, as we know, Shringar or Madhurya Rasa, or the Priyanarma Sakya Ras as kind of the window opened by Bhakti Vinod. But then even within that, it'll become much more specific. So like years ago, Guru Maharaj, he gave for his disciples to start to begin to meditate on the Ashtakali Leela. He took the 8 root verses that I mentioned at the beginning of each of the chapters, and he put those alongside the verses describing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Ashtakali Leela. And so it's one thing to like I said, okay, so we hear about Krishna, and as we get more involved and absorbed, oh wow, there's 24 hours in Krishna's day just like in ours, and those 24 hours are divided up into these different periods, and so that's already becoming more specific. And then within those periods, there are different leelas that pertain more specifically to the mood that one is interested in. So obviously the midday pastimes are going to be very central for meditating, for those cultivating Bhavala Srati, or the Manjari Bhav, Gopi Bhav. So then it becomes more specific. And then, but then it's one, so then now we know that there's the existence of this Ashtakali Leela. And then in each one of these periods, you kind of have an outline of what goes on in each one of those periods. Like we heard that overview verse. And then that is becoming more specific. And then within each one of those periods now, then there's so much more detail being played out. So as our own, those details will become more relevant as our own adhikar increases over time. So in the beginning, it's like Guru Maharaj probably wouldn't advise most of his disciples to try to meditate in any deep way on the Ashtakali Lila, because it's going to be beyond the vast majority of us. And of course, the general instruction, of course, is to cultivate surrender to the name. And as one moves from sadhana bhakti to bhava bhakti, then all these more all the details going to become much more relevant. Then you can actually meditate on the leelas with the details are relevant to one's cultivating one's bhav or doing leela seva directly in the meditative leela. But for us, it's nice to hear these types of details in order to have some idea of what goes on there. And the more details we have in our mind, I guess that's a kind of a good thing. Just in the middle of your day, you could be commuting, driving down the road or whatever, and thinking about how Radha and Krishna are playing dice and during the midday pastime, and that's certainly going to be auspicious. So with that, we come to a close. We're out of time, and if there's any comments or questions, we can entertain them now. And if not, well, we'll wrap it up. Okay, it's looking like a no. Govinda Mohini, you have something?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I just want to thank you very much for the wonderful series. And it was very, very nice to go through also the book you read and all the details about the gopis, the manjaris. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
You're so welcome. I hope this can help us become a little bit more absorbed.
Yeah.
All right, dear friends, I hope you all have a wonderful day, night, whatever it happens to be for you. And until next time. Oh. Okay. I think the general idea in the beginning anyway is that we want to hear the Leelas. And for most people, we want to hear the Bhagavatam more than, say, Govinda Lilamrita, because it's going to be more relevant to us. And so, generally speaking, the Prakat Leela is where we should focus our attention. Same with Gaur Leela as well. So, like the Chaitanya Charitamrita, how it's played out there in terms of Mahaprabhu's appearance and then his leaving the world and whatnot, and also his Acharya Leela, which doesn't happen in the Nitya Leela of Gaur Leela, but that Acharya Leela is for us. So that's how we can take advantage of the Gaur Leela and actually enter into there, is through the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a sannyasi, even though there is no sannyas Leela in the Nitya Gaur Leela. Likewise, the Prakat Leela, Krishna Leela, is the entry point for sadhakas, for practitioners like us. And so we're advised, generally speaking, to meditate more on the Prakat Leela. And also, in the context of doing that, we want to try to, well, the very first thing we're going to do, of course, is just get a handle on the narration, the narrative, what's actually happening. Like Krishna does this, then he goes there, then he does that, then he does that. Okay, that's becoming familiar. And as we become more familiar with it, then we want to start to try to draw some philosophical meaning out of the Leela. So these Leelas are just Krishna's play, but they're also, because Krishna is the manifestation of truth and beauty. So the sweetness that you mentioned is the beauty aspect. And then the underlying truth aspect is what makes it worth pursuing, because it's God, it's truth. So when we're first becoming acquainted with the sweetness of the Leela, we want to try to see it philosophically and draw the truth, see where the underlying current of truth is, the tattva in the Leela. And interestingly, like I pointed out in the Govinda Lilamrita, and there are times, many times, when the Vrajavasis will be in the midst of a Leela, they'll suddenly, like the gopis will suddenly start quoting the Vedas or whatnot. So it's like, even though they're the drama, they are just simple village girls. They are full of knowledge. They know the Shastra. They know Krishna's position. But and then in the context of the Leela, they may speak some Siddhanta, which is quite, I always find it quite funny, because they're, that Siddhanta has no bearing whatsoever on the Leela, how they feel about Krishna, even though, like, they'll be criticizing Krishna, like there's a pastime where the gopis are saying to Krishna, you cut off the nose of Surpanaka as Ram. And they go through all these different things that he's done as different avatars and whatnot. So they know his position as God, and yet they're using all this information to criticize him. So that's the sweetness aspect. But for us as sadhakas, what we try to do is with the help of hearing from advanced devotees like Guru Maharaj, we try to draw out some philosophical meaning that we can then apply in our lives. So the midday pastimes, well, I didn't really think too much about it from that particular angle, and so I don't have to think more about it to see what the philosophical import of the midday pastimes could be. I wanted to just more share the kind of how Radha's love works in motion, how she interacts, and how the whole how the Leela works with Krishna's friends and everything. But in general, to answer your question, yeah, we want to try to draw some philosophy out of the Leela if we can. And that'll help us, that'll qualify us, purify our intelligence, so that then we can enter more deeply into the Leela and start to get some actual feeling for the thing. Right. And then we start to move gradually by studying the tattva of the Leela. We gradually move from being preoccupied with the tattva, which is not a bad thing, but eventually that'll start to morph into being more concerned with the feeling of the thing. And gradually and ultimately we become absorbed in the feeling, and the tattva is like, that's just in the background. Kind of the way Srila Sri Radha describes how in this world the holy name is prominent, and yet in the Leela it recedes to the background, but it's there kind of energizing the whole thing. So in the same way, the tattva is underlying it, and that's the soil, as you say, or the ground upon which the Leela is standing. The stage of the Leela is upon the ground of tattva, advaigyan tattva. But that's not what the Vrajavasis aren't meditating on that. And so, and for advanced devotees who are participating in Leela Seva, let's say when they chant their rounds, they go internal and they can actually serve in the Leela, then the tattva at that point is not relevant. Just kind of, it's in the background. But for us, it's good to keep that in the tattva in mind. And that's why Srila Prabhupada was very, very, very adamant. And this is the general thrust of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and Bhakti Parivar, is just that we want to keep in mind who was doing these things that we're talking about. You know, this is not just some kid hanging out with a bunch of girls at a pond, right? This is God. So, you know, to kind of keep that in mind, so that we don't mistake or misconstrue what is being said as it being something mundane. But once we have that down, then yeah, then we can think about these things, understanding that it's God, and we can think about these things without being too concerned that it's going to corrupt our intelligence in some way and turn us toward the mundane. But still, you know, the Sridhar Maharaj was very, for example, was very pointed out on a number of occasions that these Leelas of Radha and Madhava are very intimate, and we should approach them, you know, with all reverence and whatnot. So Raganuga Bhakti is, like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati would say, Pujala Raga Patta Gaudava Bhange. So the path of Rag is very, very high, and we consider ourselves to be below that. We keep it on our head as a goal, but we don't think that we're actually qualified. And by thinking that we're unqualified, eventually we become qualified. Something like that. I hope that helps. Okay, good. I'm glad it was helpful. Okay. Well, we've gone a bit over time, but hopefully we will all survive. Well, so that's it. Looks like that's it. Well, dear friends, till next time, till Padmanabha Maharaj approaches me for another series. Well, we'll see you next time, whenever that happens to be. Might be, he's been talking to me a little bit, might be in maybe January or February, we'll see. But meanwhile, we've got plenty to meditate on. So, dandavats to you all.
Shriman Citta Hari Prabhu ki jai.
Hi.
All right, thank you. Haribol. Okay. Hari.